Hello, YouTube divers. This is Water Dive 122, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of Marching Band and Drum Corps Review. So, we are going to finish ranking the Blue Devil shows from 2008 to 2026. Last time we ranked shows 17 through 8, and now we're going to be tackling the rest of the list going from number 7 to number 1. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's get this party started. So coming in at number 7 is their 2012 show, Cabaret Voltaire. This may come as a surprise to some Blue Devils fans and alum to an extent. And I was expecting to have this show up there in the top 3 or top 5, but I just like other shows better. And also, this is the ugliest show on this list. If any of you have known the history about the show, this show was not a fan favorite in 2012. Carolina Crown that year had a show called For the Common Good, and that very much resonated with audiences in the DCI community, and they wanted that show to win. But Cabaret Voltaire ended up winning in 2012 with a score of 98.700. And yeah, people just did not like this show back in 2012. And that is mainly because of some of the weaknesses here, particularly with its very dissonant avant-garde Dadaism-esque sound and experimentation. And it's very crunchy chords. It kind of just makes you want to cringe sometimes. And also, I think the ballad here is a little bit lackluster. And the electronic audio here is not strong. In fact, it just kind of makes me shiver, if you will. But the strengths here more than make up for those weaknesses, in my opinion. I love how the show was designed. Basically with the Blue Devils basically pulling a reverse metamorph, if you will, where they start off with contemporary uniforms, and then as the show progresses, they change into their main uniforms with the shakos and plumes and the jackets and all that fun stuff. The percussion was also really on fire this season, particularly the drums. One of the tightest percussion groups in Blue Devils history, in my opinion. And then the musical repertoire is this show's biggest strength, because this repertoire is ridiculously difficult. And they executed it just as well as you could possibly imagine it. This show just has some of the coolest music out there, even if it makes you cringe. And honestly, this show is very ahead of its time as well. Back in those days, you were mainly seeing drum corps do like safe for work shows with powerful brass lines and percussion lines and drill. But what the Blue Devils did this year was exactly the polar opposite. This show was designed to not make any sense. And I guess that's a reason why back then it was so hated. But looking back on it now, where basically drum corps are just doing whatever the heck they want to do, within the musical repertoire, the drill writing, the prop usage, etc. I applaud the heck out of the Blue Devils for doing something like this in this timeline. And it resulted in a championship win. So, yeah, with that said, number 7 is Cabaret Voltaire, one of the greatest Blue Devil shows of all time. Now we're moving on to number 6. We've got another pretty recent show, 2024's The Romantics. So this show is also pretty historic because this show got 3rd place that year. It won the bronze medal, and it was the first time the Blue Devils have been outside of the top 2 since 2006. And it was also, at the time, the lowest they've placed since 2006 until the following season. This show did have a very good score of 97.075, but but it was not enough to beat the Boston Crusaders and the Bluecoats, the latter of which won the championship that season. But when I look back at the Romantics, this was the first Blue Devil show that I got to witness as a fan of the Corps. Like, 2024 was the first season where I really started to follow DCI, and basically all the Corps. And when I saw the Blue Devil show, when I saw the Romantics show, I didn't see it live, unfortunately. I was just blown away. The uniforms, in my opinion, is this show's biggest strength. This easily, without a doubt, has the best uniforms I've ever seen from the Blue Devils. Those black jackets with the blue and pink color schemes, as well as the white near the stomach, and those black capes. Oh my goodness, those black capes are just so awesome to watch. And they really make for some great visual effects, which, contrary to my previous statement, is actually one of the weaknesses this show has, in my opinion. But the Guard was lights out fantastic. I think they were a little bit better the following season, but the Guard this season was undeniably awesome. And then the Brass in 2024 Blue Devils is one of the most underrated Blue Devil brass lines ever, in my opinion. They were so powerful, so emotional, and it's just a very, very talented group of individuals. But then the weaknesses. This show did get third place for a reason. I thought the props and show design were kind of lackluster. I thought the drill could have been a little bit better. It was very, very good, by the way. I just think it could have been a little bit better. And then, of course, I already touched on this, some visual dirt here and there. Like, like I said, with some of the bottom entries from the previous video, I feel like it just was not executed very well. I think some forms were just a little bit lumpy, and it was just not very satisfying to watch, if you will. But that doesn't stop me from personally rating this show an 8.9 out of 10, nearly crossing into a 9. I think this is a very memorable show, and it was such a refreshing watch for the purpose of this ranking. Okay, so now we are going to number 5, and these last 5 shows, with the exception of one, I'm pretty familiar with. So my bias might lean its head around the corner for some of these shows, but let's get stuck in. So next up at number 5 is Ghostlight from 2019. Holy smokes, this show is remarkable. This was another championship-winning show from the Blue Devils, with a score of 98.325, beating out the Bluecoats that year, again. I think this show has a lot going for it. The strengths are amazing. I think the show has some of the best props from the Blue Devils, maybe ever. I love how they were utilized in the show. More on that in a little bit. I love the light bulb prop that they had on the field this season, and how it just stayed on the entire runtime of the show. I love that. The Guard was stunning this season. I love the Guard. And then the drum line had some really iconic moments, mainly when they put tap dancing shoes on their hands, and they played like a little percussion feature on one of the props. And that was so cool and unique. I've never seen another show where a drum line does that. So kudos to the Blue Devils for doing that. But the weaknesses. I think there is some visual dirt, kind of like what I talked about in the previous entry. I thought the drill was just not really consistently engaging. It does have some strong points for sure, but execution-wise, I don't think it was consistently well put together. And then the musical execution as well, particularly in the brass. I felt wasn't as strong as some other shows. Um, but yeah, overall, Ghostlight, I rated a solid 9 out of 10, and it kicks off the top 5 with a bang. I love this show. But it's here number 5, so let's find out what the next 4 are. So number 4 is a very important show for me, and that is The Cutouts from 2023. Easily the best Blue Devil show post-COVID, without a doubt. This show was also really special to me because this was not only the show that got me into the Blue Devils, but it was the show that got me into drum corps altogether. The biggest strength with this show is the opener. The opener, I will go ahead and say, is one of the greatest openers to any drum corps show ever. The beautiful singing electronics, those slow visuals, the beautiful, stunning choreography in the color guard. Oh, so awesome! And of course, how can you not forget those opening musical phrases in the brass, as they're just jazz running all over the place, forming like a curvilinear wave shape, if you will. And speaking of the brass was fantastic this season, in my opinion, and the props of those different colored squares all across the field, squares and rectangles that were eventually the stage for the color guard at the very end of the show. Wonderful. Just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And if I did have to pick out some weaknesses, and kind of have to go on a limb here and say that there is some weaknesses, I felt the guard wasn't quite as strong, especially not as strong as what they would get to in 2024, 2025, and this year. The percussion, in my opinion, was also not really the strongest. I think they've done better on other shows. And then the musical clarity, this is a really, really minor nitpick, was just not really consistently executed very well. Like, there will be some instances where I'll hear like some super fuzzy chords, some super fuzzy tones, and not really clear articulations here and there. But again, it's very, very few and far and in between. The Cutouts is a wonderful show. 9.3 out of 10. I would not be a DCI fan without this show. So, it comes in here at number 4. So number 3, we are moving on to, in my opinion, the best silver medal winning show from the Blue Devils of the last 17 seasons anyway, and the show that completely caught me by surprise, 2011's The Beat My Heart Skipped. This was actually a fan favorite show back in those days. It lost to the Cadets that season, with the score of 97.800. The show got second place. And I can honestly kind of see why. I think the Cadets were just better prepped and had a better executed show that season than the Blue Devils did. But make no mistake, I loved pretty much every single aspect of this show. The guard was fantastic. The props, while they were kind of basic, they did do enough to tell the story. And I love the ending build where it was a house, where they built like a house and a driveway. Oh, that was so good. And then the ballad is probably the best ballad of the early 2010s Blue Devils, if I'm being totally honest. It's just so heart-wrenching and so emotional. And if I did have to pick a few weaknesses, I felt like the percussion, visuals, and drill execution were kind of off-putting in several aspects of the show. But honestly, it's very few and far and in between. I'm just basically just nitpicking at this point, because not every show can be a 10 out of 10. But that doesn't stop me from rating The Beat My Heart Skipped a 9.5 out of 10. I adore the show, and it just totally blew me away. yeah, but comes in here at number 3. So now we get to number 2 and number 1, and both of these shows are championship winning shows from the Blue Devils, and both are iconic drum corps shows. But where am I going to rank them? So number 2 is Metamorph from 2017. This was a very, very well-beloved show that I think was very much needed in the drum corps activity. At the time, drum corps was going through a big change, a metamorphosis, if you will, where the corps were abandoning the old school military aspect of drum corps that made drum corps what it was for so many years in favor of a more modern high school marching band-esque type of show production, where they were using huge props. They were abandoning the shakos. They were abandoning the jackets. They were abandoning the super long bibbers in favor of more contemporary costuming and show and field design. And people were openly opposed this change. But then came the Blue Devils 2017 show, with Metamorph. And it was a show that reignited the fandom in drum corps and basically kickstarted a whole new era of the activity. It won the championship this season with a score of 98.538. And this show is pretty much flawless, in my opinion. It does have some weaknesses. If I had to choose some, it would probably be the guard, who were stunning this season. But I think there have been other great Blue Devil guards here. Same thing with the percussion, mainly in the drum line. The choreography, to an extent, was also not the strongest. I think they've done better choreography in other shows. But the strengths are pretty much everything else. The ballad soloists, the screeching high trumpets, the beautiful stair props, and the show design in of its own self, and the concept, as I mentioned. The costume changes midway through, just an ingenious idea. This show also kind of restored the respect for the Blue Devils, or at least for a few years, because from what I've been told, with me interacting with some Blue Devil alumni over the years, this was like the one show where people were like, oh, I'm not a Blue Devils fan, I don't like them at all, but this show is the exception. This show actually goes really hard. And basically, Metamorph has just basically been the blueprint for pretty much all Blue Devil shows going forward, or at least from a basic essence perspective, if you will. But yeah, overall, Metamorph, a masterpiece in the DCI lore, one of the best DCI shows of all time. It comes in here with a 9.7 out of 10 rating for me, and number 2 on my list. So now we get to number 1, and I'm pretty sure if you are even the most casual drum corps fan alive, I'm sure you know what this show is. And if you're a Blue Devils fan, I'm pretty sure you do know too. It is their 2014 show, Fellini-esque. I mean, of course it is. This show is mind-blowing from start to finish. I don't think there was a single weak moment throughout the show. There were obviously some really minor mistakes that, of course, the judges did not seem to capture on finals night. There's like some very minor foot timing issues. There were some minor hiccups in the guard, etc. But when you look at the essence of this show and basically the legacy and the historical significance that it left behind, this has to be number 1. First of all, this is the highest scoring drum corps show of all time with a 99.65, resulting in perfect scores in both the general effect and visual captions, for good reason. Both were just fantastic, but the The only imperfect ounce of this show was the music. The percussion did not win the Fran Sanford Best Percussion Award that season. It was the only caption they lost. They lost it to Santa Clara Vanguard. But the brass was incredible this season. They were super clean, super to the point, super punchy, super powerful. I'll never forget that opening harmonizing fast triplets in the trumpets in the opening minutes of the show. Super duper clean, super clean. And of course, it's got pretty much everything you could ever want in a Blue Devil show. It's got the iconic pinwheel, which they would also do again in shows like Tempest Blue. They would do, I mean, of course, the props were fantastic. Basically, putting yourself in the Joseph Fellini's world with like movie cameras and stages and stage lights, camera lights. Oh, so good. It was so good, rather. And the guard this season, outside of a few minor hiccups here and there, it's just stunning. Everything about the show is fantastic. There is no weak moment in this show for me, and it deserves every single point that it got that season. It deserves the high score. I don't care what anyone says. It is a 10 out of 10 show for me, and it's one of my favorite drum corps shows of all time, if not my favorite. Fellini-esque, just get goosebumps every time I watch this show. It is a masterpiece, one of, if not the greatest drum corps show of all time. So with that said, that concludes my ranking for the Blue Devils. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is Water9 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.